Alright everybody, welcome back. So, September dev season has begun. We've been receiving our first dev blogs already. There's a lot of buzz around what new aircraft are going to be coming, and as of now, I have a pretty solid prediction. I believe we'll get the F-15 Eagle, specifically the A model, in the game soon, most likely next patch. There's a few things that line up with this prediction, but before I cover that, I'd like to nail down exactly what the F-15A is. I've seen a ton of comments with people very confused as to what the F-15A is. First of all, I want to talk F-15 and AMRAAM. The F-15 does not have to drop with AMRAAM. In fact, I don't think it will in the first place. I really don't get why there's this widespread thing of, if we get F-15, it has to get AMRAAM. But the F-15 existed well before the AMRAAM was even a thought. The F-15 as a concept was being developed since the Vietnam War and was accelerated by the introduction of the MiG-25 in 1965. The Eagle first flew in 1972, entered service in 1976. The AMRAAM? It didn't enter service until 1991. That's a solid 15 years between the introduction date of the Eagle and the AMRAAM. The Eagle flew before the AMRAAM was even a concept. I see no reason why the first F-15 has to drop with it. This leaves us with the initial loadout for the F-15 that it used for the first part of its service. Here's the 1979 F-15 loadout, for example. AIM-9J, AIM-9L, and AIM-7F. Nothing crazy here. The F-15 itself has nice performance as well, similar to the MiG-29 in most regards, starting out slightly worse at normal fuel loads and getting slightly better at low fuel. This leaves us a plane with basically MiG-29 flight performance, and 4 AIM-7Fs and 4 AIM-9L. Perfectly fine to come right now, possibly with a buff to the MiG-29 as well, if Gaijin thinks it needs it, like the R-73 for example. Honestly, I don't really think it would really need it, as the R-27ER is much stronger than the AIM-7F for REM, so I don't think it needs better IR missiles as well, but that is at least an option for a counter, as the SE-27, especially with R-27ERs, would be overkill for an F-15A. But I will be talking more about that later on, so just keep that in mind. People have been talking about the flare situation as well, and yes, initially the F-15A didn't have flares. However, at least one testbed did receive flares with the MSIP kit, and other F-15As entered service with at least parts of the MSIP kit as well. Here's an F-15A in the Oregon Air National Guard, for example, with the MSIP flares in 2008. This means that, from Gaijin's perspective, they can just give it the flares. Think about the F-5C, for example. The F-5C itself never had flares in service, but it received them in game because the F-5A, which is the same airframe, also received them. Exact same scenario. The F-14S ASA got flares because a single one used them. All Gaijin would have to do in this case is just give the MSIP flares to an earlier F-15A, which wouldn't be a stretch at all and let it fit in the game quite well, because the MSIP radar is probably a bit too strong for the game as of now. Even if that hadn't happened, which I do have proof, the F-15C is also the same airframe as the F-15A, so the flares would still be compatible even if they hadn't done a testbed or modded some other A's. The F-15A also gives the Israelis a BVR platform, as they're currently the only nation at top tier with no BVR platform, even the current S-2000 having the Sparrows removed after Gaijin found out it couldn't guide them. Now, as for why I specifically think it will come this patch, that comes down to a couple things. Firstly, I just don't see them skipping the initial F-15 variant. This aircraft is incredibly iconic, and skipping the 1990s just really doesn't sound right, especially when it can fill texture gaps in the game. Gaijin has also said they're working on a BVR platform for Israel to help with that current S-2000 situation I mentioned earlier. It would make sense. This would only leave one patch where Israel wouldn't have anything with Sparrows at this BR, and this also slots in with the fact that we know the Gripen is coming this year. Gaijin specifically confirmed the C variant. The problem with this is that it lacks a CW illuminator. Just like the J-8F not having a Speed A's earlier this year, and the current S-2000 losing its Sparrows, this means that it cannot guide semi-active radar homing missiles. So they either add it with only AIM-9L, which basically makes it a slightly worse F-16A, or they add it as one of the first jets with AMRAAM. Seek covers this in more detail on his video on the AMRAAM specifically. I'd recommend checking that out after you finish this video. But for me personally, I think it makes a lot of sense, as if they were just going to add it without AMRAAM, we would have gotten it last year with the rest of the 4th gen aircraft, or at least in March when the AC-141 and the F-16AJ came out. I just don't see them dropping a plane as hyped as the Gripen is without any form of radar missiles, especially 9 months after the equivalent 4th gen fighters that also didn't have radar missiles came out for other nations. This puts the Sparrow F-15 in a pickle. I don't see Gaijin not having Sparrow F-15 meta for at least a patch or two, but I also don't see them not making the Gripen meta on release. Both planes are just way too hyped for that. That means, if true, we have 2 patches before AMRAAMs on a Gen 4 platform. Some people think that we'll just get the F-15 with AMRAAM the same patch, but the problem there is that the F-15 has much stronger flight performance than the Gripen. If they did come the same patch, then we wouldn't get that Gripen meta either. This leaves us with only one timeline, at least in my opinion. F-15A this patch for Israel, and probably the US. October patch is typically filler, and then the Gripen in December with the AMRAAM drop, along with stuff like the F-4FIs, or even just giving the F-16ADF and MLU their AMRAAMs and the Tornado and other lesser platforms, for example the AV-8B. This would give the Gripen a decided advantage, as it would be the only 4th gen with 4 AMRAAMs, and would still give the Sparrow F-15s a little bit of time in the sun. I also wouldn't expect an F-15C or J with AMRAAM before at least the March of next year, possibly even the June patch. The J in particular wouldn't make sense to come only 5 months after the controversial introduction of the F-16AJ. If they were gonna add it this soon, they would have just waited. I expect them both to come next year, but as of now, it just really doesn't make sense. Finally, as for the SU-27 in the room, personally, I really don't think it needs to be added. Definitely not with the R-27ER. If it did come, as long as it was limited to R-27 RNT, I would probably be okay with it. But if it dropped with the full kit of 4 R-73, 4 R-27ER, and 2 R-27ET, it wouldn't even be a competition against the F-15A with only AIM-9Ls and AIM-7F. Even if they restricted it to, for example, 2 R-27ERs, that would still be 4 R-73s, 2 R-27ERs, and 4 more assorted R-27s. Still way too strong. For now at least, I think the F-15A would be totally fine to come without a dedicated counter, and save the SU-27 for when we get the F-15C with AMRAAM later on. At the end of the day, of course, this is all just speculation, even though I will say I think it's incredibly strong speculation. The teaser should be dropping either August 31st or September 7th, as it came out Thursday the 1st last year, so I do have a strong feeling we're going to see for sure either way. In any case, let me know what you think in the comments below. What are your predictions for the patch? And I'll catch y'all next time. Peace, y'all.